You ever have those days where you feel like you've been running on a treadmill, just going and going, but you look up and realize you haven't actually gone anywhere? Yeah, that's the feeling of a distracted mind. We're all so busy, constantly busy, but are we actually productive? That's the big question. And it's exactly this feeling, this state of just motion without progress, that we're going to unpack.
Okay, let's just start with this quote right here. They're suckers for irrelevancy. Everything distracts them. Wow. The late Stanford professor Clifford Nass, well, he did not pull any punches when his research led him to that conclusion about heavy multitaskers. His work, it paints a really stark picture. And honestly, it's a huge wake-up call for pretty much anyone who prides themselves on being a great juggler of tasks.
So, be honest. You think you're a pretty good multitasker, right? We all do. We're answering an email during a Zoom call, we're scrolling through our phone while a show is on. It's just what we do. But what if I told you the science, the actual hard data, says that's, well, basically a myth? Let's take a peek at what's really happening inside your brain when you try to do it all at once.
All right, first up, the multitasking myth. It's time to bust this thing wide open. And look, we're not just throwing opinions around, we're diving into some pretty groundbreaking science here that might just change the way you think about focus forever.
So this is where it gets really interesting. And honestly, a little ironic. The Stanford researchers who did this study, they actually went in thinking they'd find the secret to being a great multitasker. They figured the people who did it all the time would be amazing at it. But they found the exact opposite. It turns out, the more you multitask, the worse you are at paying attention, controlling your memory, and even just switching between tasks. Wild, right?
So you're probably wondering, how did they prove this? Well, they ran some really clever tests. For example, they showed people a screen with a bunch of red and blue rectangles and just asked them to keep track of the red ones. Simple, right? But the high multitaskers couldn't do it. Their brains just kept getting hung up on the blue rectangles, the stuff that didn't matter. They tested working memory. Same story. The multitaskers did worse. And finally, they tested how quickly people could switch from one task to another, and, you guessed it, the so-called expert multitaskers were actually slower.
Okay, so let's get into the real cost of all this distraction. And believe me, this isn't just about being a little less efficient during your workday. We're talking about real, measurable cognitive costs. There's a hidden price we're all paying for this constant state of busyness.
You know that feeling when your brain just feels like it's buffering, like a slow internet connection? Well, there's a name for that, attention residue. A researcher named Dr. Sophie Leroy came up with the term, and it's brilliant. It's this idea that whenever you switch from one task to another, a little piece of your brain, a residue, gets left behind on the old task. So even though you think you've moved on, part of your brain is still chewing on what you were just doing. And that absolutely tanks your performance on the new thing.
And I bet you know exactly what this feels like. You're sitting in a meeting, but you're still replaying the conversation from the last meeting in your head. That's attention residue. Or how about when a single email notification pops up and completely derails your train of thought for like 10 minutes? That's the cost of switching, right there in action. And it doesn't matter if it's a big switch or a tiny one. That cognitive penalty is real.
And okay, if that wasn't worrying enough, let's talk about a much more alarming long-term consequence. There's this term, digital dementia, coined by a German neuroscientist, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It describes how this chronic state of distraction from our phones, our laptops, all of it, can actually lead to the deterioration of our cognitive abilities. We're talking memory, attention span. Basically, it's the kind of cognitive decline you'd expect to see much, much later in life, but it's happening in younger, otherwise healthy brains.
Still not convinced this is a big deal? Okay, how about this number? 40%. That's the drop in productivity researchers see when you're multitasking. But get this, it also comes with a temporary IQ drop of up to 15 points. To put that in perspective, that's basically the same effect as pulling an all-nighter. So you're making yourself dumber, temporarily, without any of the fun of staying up all night.
Okay, enough doom and gloom. We've established that distraction is a massive problem. But the good news is, there's a solution. There's an antidote, and it's called deep work. This is the way we fight back against our constantly distracted minds.
So this whole idea was popularized by a guy named Cal Newport, and he basically splits all work into two buckets. On one side, you have deep work. This is the hard stuff, the cognitively demanding tasks you do without any distractions. It's where you create real value, where you actually improve your skills.
Then, on the other side, you have shallow work. Think answering emails, logistics, most meetings. The stuff that's often done while you're distracted. It keeps you feeling busy, but it doesn't really create much new value in the world.
And Cal Newport himself really hits the nail on the head with this. He says we're most productive when we focus on a very small number of projects and just devote a huge amount of attention to them. It's a total shift from trying to do more to trying to do better. It's all about quality, not quantity.
All right, so that all sounds great in theory, right? But how do we actually pull this off? I mean, it's one thing to understand the idea, but it's another thing entirely to put it into practice. So let's get into the real nitty-gritty, the actual tactics for building deep focus in a world that is literally designed to distract you at every turn.
First things first, your willpower, it's a finite resource. It's like a muscle that gets tired. So instead of trying to force yourself to focus, build a ritual, a boot-up sequence. It's just a simple series of actions you do every single time before you start a deep work session. Maybe it's making a specific cup of tea, putting on your noise-canceling headphones, or just opening the blinds. This consistent routine becomes a powerful trigger that tells your brain, okay, pay attention, it's go time.
Next up, embrace time blocking. You have to start treating your focus time like it's the most important meeting of your day. Seriously, open your calendar right now and block out long, uninterrupted chunks of time, maybe 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, for your most important work. This isn't just about time management. It's about defending your attention from everything else. By putting it on the calendar, you're making it a non-negotiable priority.
And this next part, this is where you have to be absolutely ruthless. No mercy. Turn off your phone alerts. Turn off your email alerts. Use an app blocker if you have to. Close every single browser tab that isn't essential for what you're doing right now. Heck, put your phone in another room. The goal is to create a fortress of solitude, a bubble of pure focus. And look, it's not about being antisocial. It's about being pro getting stuff done.
So we've talked about tactics, but now let's talk about a complete philosophical shift. This is about moving beyond just productivity hacks and into a whole new mindset. It's about letting go of FOMO, the fear of missing out, and instead embracing JOMO, the joy of missing out. Just look at the difference here. On one side, you've got FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. It's driven by anxiety, by constantly comparing yourself to others. It leads straight to burnout. It's fueled by all that digital noise. Then you have JOMO, the joy of missing out. This is rooted in being intentional and being content. It actually restores your energy and gives you clarity. It's about finding success not in what everyone else is doing, but in your own inner peace and joy. It's a total game changer. And get this, there's actually some super cool brain science behind this. When you embrace JOMO, when you actually let yourself be bored and stop cramming your brain with information, you activate something called the default mode network. Think of it as your brain's screensaver mode. It's this resting state where your brain isn't focused on the outside world, so it starts making creative connections, reflecting on things, and solving problems in the background. This is where those amazing aha moments come from. You literally can't force them. You have to create the space for them.
So really, at the end of the day, JOMO is so much more than just a cute acronym or a productivity hack. It's a radical act. It's a rebellion against a world that basically profits from keeping you exhausted and distracted. It's you reclaiming your time, your attention, and frankly, your life.
So, I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. What would your life actually look like if you started to value joy just as much as you value productivity? What if your well-being was just as important as your to-do list? Something to think about, for sure.